school district where we do that quite successfully. And it's not always perfect and it's not always pretty, but you get really smart people who get really engaged in an important issue and circle around it and dedicate themselves to it over a longer period of time. And they generally come up with really good solutions, or probably the best solutions we're going to be able to achieve in an imperfect world. But that takes some time. And I would agree that even now, with the target being 2017, if that's the target, we need to get going on that right away. And I've given some thought to whether or not this would become work of our current grade reconfiguration task forces, or whether it would become a new task force, maybe that pulled or had some connections to or representation from the grade reconfiguration task forces. But I think the big issue is what's the tolerance of the board to allow that time to move towards the target you've established in the resolution you've adopted, versus really demanding that the system move more quickly, which is going to require some steps, whether programmatically or monetarily, that I'm not quite sure would be the best to take at this moment in time. We'll do whatever the board directs, but I will say, if it's desired to have 8 or 8:30 by fall of 2015, you will have to circle back to that document, get down at the operational and tactical level, and tell us very clearly right now what you will or will not support. Because we will come up with a plan that will be woefully imperfect. And it will be something that you'll need to own and support if we're going to be successful at any kind of implementation next fall. And I continue to be really concerned about it being realistic to purchase, outfit, store, service 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 new buses between now and next fall. I think that's not a practical expectation. But I think we can move towards, I think we can hit our target. We just need a little bit more time and capacity and a different process to be able to do that. That's clear or helpful in any way, shape, or form.
So President Quinn, I believe I've heard at least 3, 4, counting yourself, saying you would like to see, or would be interested in, or willing to look at some incremental change, at least 10 minutes on your part, and larger change on the part of the rest of the board. And so I would say that the next steps are that we'll get information back from staff about what those 7:40, 8 o'clock, and maybe the 10-minute options look like, and what the cost associated with those are.
We're going to hope to have that for this Friday's briefing, and then of course we're going to be out on midwinter break for a week. So, but we're going to. Ryan and I talked in the 5 minutes between the study session and this meeting, and we're going to hope to have those. It's just modifying some of the work that we've already done, so I think we can get those pretty quickly too.
And to the subject of a task force for 2017, I think that that's a good idea. I think that I would really like to see PALS people involved in that task force. I'm tired of that being kind of an outside group, and I think that some good collaboration between our strongest advocates that have been working at this for almost a decade and our district, which has infinite knowledge of all of the problems associated with this issue, would be a really great working relationship. I think they've proven that for years as well, as they've worked on the Versatrans repeatedly. So I would like to see PALS included in that task force.
And I think we've demonstrated in the past a willingness to bring them in and work with them. It hasn't always worked out, I think, in the manner that everybody would like. But certainly as we look at any of our task forces, when we talk about getting representative stakeholder involvement, we've got to look broadly at that involvement, and certainly PALS and folks who've been invested in later start over a period of time are an important stakeholder voice in this conversation.
I have a follow-up question. So based on the information that Ryan's going to look so hard to get us, to follow up on a point that Janet made, how long then would it take for Lydia's group to look at how that would impact 2015's existing budget?
That's a harder one to answer because there is so little clarity about what that budget is going to look like. I mean, I think in
From
the,
the state,
from
from
the
Olympia?
from Olympia, yeah, I mean, I think in a global sense, you know, we can move forward, rest assured that we're not going to see any cuts in our funding. There's going to be some level of enhancement or McCleary moves forward in our funding. The question is knowing what in the world that's going to look like and how it's going to be packaged. If it comes in a COLA, that presents a different cost driver and to us than if it comes in material supplies and operating costs. Or if it comes in class size, that actually ends up putting a further strain like a COLA on local resources. So, you know, there's just a great deal of uncertainty. I don't think we're going to see a first budget out of either of the houses until late March. That's when they're scheduled to release budgets, and even then, sort of similar to the governor's budget, I don't know that I would put much stock in those at this point in the session. It seems to be, if I'm looking at Sandy, the session seems to be winding its way out as most of our legislators had predicted, which is a whole lot of nothing for a long period of time.
Can we also get the cost, with it, if possible, during that board briefing of the option that we talked about with the 7th period, and Sandy had brought that up, and you said it might be around $8 million.
That is already done the numbers.
So yeah,
Oh, you guys already did.
so Lydia, my pencil math wasn't too far off. My 8 million was all of secondary, so that was, I was thinking 712. Lydia recalculated, if you're just talking about providing a universal 7th period for grades 10 through 12, you're talking in the neighborhood of about $3.6 million. If you're talking universal 7th period for grades 9 through 12, which of course we're not a 9 through 12 system yet, you're talking about $4.8 million. Again though, there's another tail to that, which is if the high school day is now an hour longer than our elementary and our junior high days, we're going to have the same issues with needing redundant or concurrent transportation, because it will disrupt the tier system, and that we would need to do some more analysis to see what that would look like. But it would probably look pretty close to, in my mind, it would probably look pretty close to more like the 2-tier model in the scenarios that were recently run for the board.
Just remind me, in any of those scenarios, I think we looked at some of those scenarios running middle school and high school together. Okay, so maybe on the 3-tier system, we can maybe look at that. You know, not trying to make it too complicated, some of these things that have proven to have cost savings, and how do we do this, or at least mitigate it?
So yeah, there's some cost potentials. I don't know if necessarily cost savings, but you can do that differently. As I explained earlier, it starts to look more like a transit system where buses are then making multiple stops, which is some of the criticism we heard a couple of years ago when we moved forward 10 minutes and people were complaining that the bus was still coming at the same time, because some of the underlying dynamics of the structure required that the bus still picked up at the same time. We could move a little bit later, combo the buses out, but those bus runs are now going to be longer, so the kids are going to have to be picked up earlier. You know, if you're the last one on the delivery. So it's not necessarily, it might solve one problem of start time if you didn't need to ride a bus, but it might not provide much relief for you if you did need to ride a bus. And those will be variable impacts across the district. The other
Just
impact.
what I found interesting was that every school district went to that was in the study. That's all. So
Yeah.
at some point, they might not have had the same
Yeah.
geography as us, I realize.
When you looked in the study, one of the things that it said is that a lot of the districts realized cost savings because they went to tiered transportation
No,
models.
correct, but as far as busing middle school and high school together, all 8 schools ended up doing that.
Yeah.
So either maybe some of them were already doing that, but they all ended up doing that at some point.
And it's a viable option. One of the again, and you know, I'm not feeling like I'm a terminal naysayer, but we've talked about that internally. One of the challenges with that is then sharing staff across buildings, because if you have different schools at the same levels on different schedules, then the ability to have a teacher teach 3 periods here and 2 periods over there to round out a schedule, all of a sudden those schedules don't align in the same way. It also may impact students who access some of our satellite programs. That's one of the drivers for having all of our high schools on the same time schedule, is so that students can cross over across schools to access programs more readily. So there are those kinds of programmatic impacts with, that's why I say everything has a consequence to it. It's not to say they're bad ideas, but they would inject changes to current operations.
And are you asking 2017? Is that your thinking?
What, on the 740, on the, we're talking,
She's asking 2015, I think.
or so,
if
whatever
that's
scenarios
possible.
we're running, can we run that along with it is what I'm
I would
saying.
say,
Cost-saving thoughts
Right.
with it.
And I would just remind you that we have ninth graders who are able to access that first period of high school because their schools start at a different time. And moving them to the same time in 2017 is a different question. I mean, the opportunities are there, but doing it in 2015, then you have the ripple effect of not then being able to access the higher level math or the language at the high school and still get their full periods at the junior high.
Perhaps I'm misunderstanding, but I believe that the question was that any cost savings would be also included. I think that was simply the request, that if there were cost-saving strategies, like, I thought that was just an example, not,
Of busing.
I only want that option. That was my understanding. Is that what it was just, if there's any cost-saving options out there?
Yeah,
To include
that,
those?
that we're looking at some of the main costs, because we know that there'll be costs, but there's also might be ways to mitigate those
Sure.
costs, i.e. middle school, high school, which all those districts ended up doing. But you're right, we do have the programs going up to the
Just now.
high school, correct, they're not in
Not
2017.
necessarily this year.
and I would say again, it comes back to really the timeline. If the timeline is, let's see what we can maybe do incrementally that keeps our programs basically whole right now as we move towards 2017, that's great operational tactical work for a task force to do. That's really, doesn't need to, shouldn't be, probably isn't a good use of your board time to be processing that level of information. That really should be done at the staff level and with a representative stakeholder task force. Because then they
I
can
think
look
that
at
was on our
all those
parameters
options.
as well. But yes, I
Yeah,
agree,
yeah.
for sure.
Because then they can incorporate, you need to incorporate not only the transportation options, but you need to incorporate what are the program drivers as well. And those two need to go hand in hand to a certain extent.
So I think I heard a general consensus in looking at a task force for 2017,
Yep,
and
definitely.
perhaps, I don't know what happens next, but maybe you said you were thinking about some different ways that could look, and maybe that could come in a board briefing, or I don't know if we need to vote on that, or how that works from here.
There's a week off coming next week, sounds like a good midwinter break project.
Oh,
I'd be happy to take a stab at that. We've already done some thinking around that. And I, to the point that I think, Dawn, you made in the study session, I don't think at this point we really need to bring in outside expertise because we would spend a whole bunch of time having to educate them about our system anyway. I think we can do it. It's just a question of if we have to do something by 2017, when we have an opportunity to do a reset of the whole system, or if we have to do something by 2015. That's really the driver.
Well, we're going to look at incremental in the briefing by 2015, the incremental, there's going to be some options, and then we're going to have information in the next briefing about a task force to look at the 2017.
And I think
Is that what I'm
we have
hearing?
to, I think we have to keep in mind that the students in the high schools are starting to look at their schedules now, so I mean, very soon upcoming, so.
I believe that's why we were trying to get it done.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think
just don't wanna-
in the briefing is great.
Yeah. So beyond the next meeting, we're narrowing the options for ourselves if we draw this out much more. And personally, I'm happy not to have a whole bunch more of these conversations. So I'm hearing consensus. I think we will be forming a task force, it sounds like. And I don't know, as part of that is that going to be part of their work, figuring out what incremental steps can be taken as well?
No, I don't
Obviously
think
not
so. I
for
mean,
2015,
If we're talking
for
2015, I think that's gonna need to be done at the administrative level, cabinet level, with support services, with transportation.
But for 16.
Depending on how quickly they get formed and how quickly they get wrapped around, there could be, the caution I would say about anything, again, dramatic for 2016 is it would likely be a 1 year only, and then it would be fundamentally different in 2017 as we implement boundary adjustments and grade configuration. So that's something to think about. But maybe there's further incremental steps through expanded 7th period options, or we have a small list of potential incremental steps somewhere that we've generated. I have a summary in this file.
So I feel like we've given, what I've heard is that we're forming a task force. We are looking at our Friday briefing for some of the options that we think might be worth discussing for the fall of 2015 and the associated costs. And that's really where we are.
And we'll get information about the task force. What
The
that's
task
going to
force,
look like.
we usually send out a, he's going to work
How it's
on it
gonna-
this
what it's
fall.
gonna look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to
The way it's worked
define-
in the past is
We need
that
to
we.
define purpose and representation and all of those things.
And I would like to address something that has come up in terms of communication. One from the study that we referenced in our study session about clear communication, especially on the website, to the community about why this is an important change that the board feels is necessary for students to be at their alma mater, but to frame that out to the community and get that word started as soon as possible so that they understand. But also, I believe Heather Boyce wanted current estimates of cost on the website. I think that at this point, it's premature to have those costs flowing out there, but when we do get a little firmer on what those costs are, I definitely would like to see us posting that to the community as well.
I think everything that's on I'd have to double check, but I think that the large document you received that had the multiple options generated over last month, I believe that is on the Start Time website, and that does have all it's a bit wonky to look
The
at,
same-
but yes, I do believe that's on the website, and
Yeah, that's a bit of a data dump. Maybe as we narrow it down, it will be something the community can find easier.
Right.
But I think I heard all of us say that it was important to engage the community in the process, and through the task force, we'll be able to do
Yeah.
that.
And maybe take a look at, my suggestion again is that we're not reinventing things, to look at that Fairfax, and they just did such a good job of keeping everything transparent and out there and answering questions. I mean, we can model some of our question answer sheets after that, and it was super easy to find. Like, I could find anything I was looking for with a click of a mouse. It wasn't confusing. I'm not saying ours is, but it was just everything. Like I said, it made me feel like I was part of that district, and that's obviously how we want our community to feel. It's that they're a part of it.
Maybe we could look at that website. Ours confuses me a lot, so thanks.
That's good.
Good suggestion.
Another thing that the school director in Fairfax said was that Arlington, when they made the change, and like I said, I haven't been able to connect with anybody there, but when they made the change, they had a hotline open for people with concerns that just directly could call and get their concerns addressed. So
Oh, I like that.
that'll be a little bit in the future. But anyway, thank you very much for the discussion and the ideas and clearly all of the time and thought that you have put into it for a fruitful discussion. So there you have everything you need.
And then some.
And then some. All right. And the next item on the agenda is